Hola everyone. My name is Igor. I'm the curator at the Ayarkut Foundation, and I'm so excited to welcome you at our inaugural event in Mexico City. The first edition of Ayarkut Talks will focus on alternative economy models in contemporary art, and will bring together renowned artists from Mexico and all over the world. I would like to thank you, our partners, Terremoto and PAC, who are curating the two-day program of discussions and presentations. Ayarkut is a new cultural foundation founded by InDrive Company, which aims to support artist-run initiatives, mostly, and decentralized models of art management. We are thrilled to become a part of Mexico City's vibrant art scene. And the city is full of talented artists, artist-run initiatives, art lovers, and rich cultural heritage. Ayarkut Talks will be an annual event from now on, so make sure to mark it your calendars for next year. Thank you for all coming tonight and enjoy our event.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Elena Lugo. I'm Terremoto's Executive Director. And we are super happy to have co-curated this series of talks in collaboration with the Ayarkut Foundation. For us, it's been a challenging but very exciting process to think what we could do and who we could bring to talk about these matters that are very urgent. We see this series of talks also as an opportunity to try to think and reflect on other models of making things. So this is very important for Ayarkut and for Terremoto as well, to try to have these discussions to understand how can we improve our cultural ecosystem and better so the world itself. So welcome everyone to this first panel that is titled Communing, Economic Experiments and Microeconomics Based on Collective Share, Surplus and Labor. I'm super happy to introduce you to the speakers that are here. We wanted to bring three collectives actually, but unfortunately one of them canceled last minute. But we wanted to put in dialogue different collective practices and how they are creating these new models and these new thinkings that kind of challenge the status quo of of the system or the prevailing systems that we have been living with. So let me introduce you first to Farid. Yes. From ruangrupa, probably this collective needs no introduction since it's probably the collective that most famous in the last year. But ruangrupa is a Jakarta-based collective founded by a group of artists who felt there was a great necessity for physical and mental spaces in Jakarta where artists could work intensively and could direct their attention more to means of analysis and less to mean of production. A space that conveyed the ideas of visual art which are important to analyze, mediate, and furnish, like public art, performance art, and video. ruangrupa was in charge of the artistic direction for Documenta 15. And let me also introduce to Carmen and Martina from Colectivo Amasijo. Colectivo Amasijo is a group of women of different ages and professions, and they believe that through collective cooking, they can take care of the territory, relationships, and themselves. They think that by celebrating diversity and relying on the circles of nature, we can rethink the culture of scarcity. To achieve this, they listen to non-dominant narratives close to the land. Their work is realized through different platforms, performances in public spaces, actions, celebrations in galleries, museums, and cultural spaces, as well as research processes with women who care for life. So yeah, I'm super happy to have these collectives. And I guess one of my very first questions for both of you is which strategies have you been using to create a system that is not defined by competition, but rather cooperation?
Thank you, Elena, for the introduction. I'm very happy to be here and finally being with ruangrupa. A long time ago, we did a sit-tag and they sent us a nice letter, but they couldn't come, so finally we did it. One of the things about collaboration, more than cooperation, that we are thinking or we're experiencing is at some point you cannot ask for collaboration. No, collaboration is nothing that you can ask for. Collaboration emerges. So it's basically like how can you create the conditions where your body, your desires, and your goals interact with the other ones, and then it comes together and it ends or it happens as collaboration. Because if you come and say, okay, let's collaborate, it's that you're having like this, it's not an invitation, no? It's like also you have expectations, there's a goal to be met. So I guess the moments we collaborate is because it was like a common view or a common desire, and we make the conditions for collaboration to emerge, no? I guess we use so much that word today, no? Let's collaborate, and it's not so like that. So creating the condition for this to emerge is what we've been experiencing in our work.
More like as an organic process. Okay.
Yeah, maybe I can add to it. First and foremost, thank you very, very much. I'm very, very happy to be here finally. My first time in Mexico. I've been wanting to go here for a long, long time, but a lot of things happen, like time, availability, money. Of course, big thing for today, I think we're going to talk about, and tomorrow as well. And then also COVID happened. So, but many of us have visited Mexico, and then we've always feel like very close, although not in distance, not in kilometers maybe, but like in understanding each other. So yeah, thank you very much for having me here, also for being on stage with all of you, meeting you, and hopefully the topics we're going, or the things that we're going to talk about today and tomorrow, it will not only be representational, not only talked about, but being put into practice, especially for thank you for Ayarkut Foundation. From what I understand, it's like very new in Mexico context. And then hopefully, because of this, you started with this alternative economy, then we can practice actually afterwards. And then us from Indonesia, for example, can learn how you do it as well. We don't believe that there's like one way to do things. Different contexts offers different challenges, and then also different answers could come up with. No, that's why we've done what we've done, and then trying to start answering your question hopefully, but it needs to be also addressing not only what's being shown or what's being produced, but how it's produced, because a lot of times in the art world, from our limited experiences at least, it's tokenism. It's as if we're doing things differently, but it's tough when it stopped being flowery and nice on paper, when it starts talking about things that a lot of times it's invisible, negotiation with structures, with negotiations with institutions, habits, how we used to do things, etc., etc. On paper, we can say that we're trying to do things differently, but in practice is where the underlying challenges lies. And then also, a lot of them are invisible actually. And it cannot be aestheticized, it cannot be put into presentation, etc. So a lot of times in the process of doing things, I have to be honest as well, I got bored or frustrated because we have to negotiate, never-ending negotiation, hours of conversations, all those kind of stuff. But luckily, I'm working with a lot of people that keep on reminding me that this is it, this is the art that we're doing actually as well. Part, like not only what's visible, but also the trying to change how to do things, let's say. Hopefully it's not too long.
No, that's okay. So following a little bit on what you're saying.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
to
for sure.
that?
Sorry.
I think also it's very important to say that at the end we have never been taught how to collaborate. No, we are born in a system that punish abundance. That even in school when you start, it's everything about competition, about individualism. And well, I studied economics, and I always, I learned. Sorry, my English is not that good. Like you learn from the beginning that the best efficient model is to compete. So the question also is, how can you start to collaborate when you don't know how to collaborate, when nobody has taught you how to collaborate? And something that I have learned in our collective is talking about also how can we start collaborating with ecosystems. And when you start to collaborate with ecosystem, when you start to see like the abundance of the climate, of the weathers, of the land, everything you start to see also the collaboration between humans. And so I think for us it has been very important to start to know how to collaborate through understanding the abundance of the ecosystems and the cycles and the weathers. And also as a way of saying, we don't know, how can we start to learning? Well, why not seeing in other non-human agents? And that's.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like, there's this question, right? Like, is it really possible to collaborate under this neoliberal system? Like, I think this is a question that must be answered not through theory, but through practice. I'm following a little bit on what you were saying of like, how not to think of this in a representation, but rather into the practice. Can you tell me like a specific project or a specific strategy that you actually use to challenge these individualistic competitive systems?
If I may, like maybe it's a good time to touch upon some things that are kind of like already around us right now. Like we started, I'm not going to talk about Documenta as an exhibition, but it's as an experience, because like as an exhibition, it is what it is. It has been covered, redundant. But to underline actually why we wanted to do an exhibition as a vehicle towards something else, and then we didn't know. We started with certain mechanisms, so it's not a theme, but mechanisms that we've been trying to do back home, and then with it we can consider it as a journey, and then open, of course, like every journey, like it is open for influences throughout time, and then by keep on extending invitations to work with others, and then letting go of authorship is one, control is another, and trying to address that like we live in a competitive system, but addressing and also trying to challenge it. So we actually kind of like have affinities towards each other. It's not like a big group exhibition that's like everyone is fighting for spotlights, no, a lot of times. But people starting unfortunately through Zoom, like for some artists, even it became too much. We asked too much. Understandable. We ask too much of the time and all those kind of stuff. Some people just want to work and show. Also, people can opt out. But throughout this process, certain, if you want to use the word, but like sometimes it has become rundown collaboration. People collaborate organically. Things got born or like, things were given birth because people were actually interested in it, not because we as artistic directors told everyone that it is something good. One of them is actually kind of like around us. We came up with the notion of harvest. You will be very used to that term, but like people harvest the process in order to make others understand what we've been going through, so the journey can continue, not necessarily ours anymore. And then many people, many friends, people I know, people I didn't know before, and we come to know, like we managed to make platforms like a website, for example, in order for the harvest to be published further, like lumbung.space is one. And then actually, I was surprised as well that some people from Mexico City that happen to be in Mexico City, tropical tap water, also harvesters throughout the Documenta 15. They are here right now and actually harvesting, and hopefully it is on lumbung.space. It's going to be on lumbung.space. But that kind of organic stuff, I didn't know. I didn't initiate that, but things got taken and then by other things, you know. And then we got surprised by things like that. Then it's nice. Hopefully I answer your question originally, but I just want to touch upon that. And sorry for taking too much time.
We can always go back.
Okay, so for us, I think it's not one project, what is like what connects all the projects, and it's collective cooking with different women. And I think one of the reasons that it starts by being collaborative is because it's very body, like you need to use a lot of your body. So if you don't know how to do something, you just can't do it. So it has to be very, like
Organic, yes. It depends on what can you do, no? So there is no expectations. Like when you are grinding the maize, no, you can do it by yourself, no? So it just you take times, no, to do it. Or for example, I'm very bad doing tortillas, so I always want to tortillas, but the one who knows will do it, no? So it's according to what we can do, and it's like a choreography when you are cooking, you know. So I guess our method our methodology is the collective cooking, and there is this time when you can listen to everybody, you know. There is some kind of presence while you are cooking that alerts your senses, because you're able to say things that you might not be saying because you're ashamed or different. Like strong situations that you're not able to talk while you are cooking. You can talk. You can. The body. The body makes the condition for this round container, so you can talk and express whatever you need to. You know. So I guess yes, collective cooking is our way of collaborating.
And maybe could you please delve a little bit on how this collective cooking relates also to curatorial and artistic practices? Like, for instance, what you just did at the Museo Carrillo Gil, that you put a market within a market, just to create some tension between what's happening outside, between the collectivity. Can you maybe delve into these specific projects?
Yes, well, it was like a little bit post-pandemia, and the director asked us, like, okay, let's do something in our place that relates to food, no? But it was like, can you put a cafeteria, no? And it was like, oh no. Okay, we can do that, but we won't do that, no? So we start like thinking about, like, it was in the south, no? So what happened with Milpalta. Milpalta, I don't know if you are aware of Milpalta, but it's the rural part of Mexico City, like the biggest one, and it has like this. The land is for conservation, so it's all forest, all beautiful, and most of the food that we eat in Mexico in the center is produced there. So, but all the gentrification and all the people that wants to buy that land, because what is amazing is like it's communal land. So it was like, let's do this intersection between this understanding and this political power that they have and bring it into the museum. You know? So we do this research about all the women that were producing food, but there are also academics, but there were also activists of defending the land. So we invite them to create a market, and it was also like that. We put the space and the collaboration emerged. No, it was like auto-organization. There was no competition between the people that they were at the market, and at some point, the people of Milpalta were also asking, like, this is the first time that they invite us to a contemporary thinking instead of ethnographic thing, you know, about because we speak Nahuatl or because we still dress like whatever, no? So for them it was very important to be invited to a contemporary thinking space, so they give a lot of talks also. They were talking about the land and the issues about Milpalta, and you were looking at the food they were talking about, no? So it was really like hands-on, no? So it was not about talking, so that the food was there, and they were inviting like the people, come and buy the things, because if you keep buying the things, we can still defend the territory. So, and you have to be co-responsible of what we are suffering in Milpalta, because if we don't have water, if the forests are like ending, then the city will collapse. So it's not about us, it's about all the people. So it was hard for all the public, because it was like also like they were very regañonas, no, I don't know how to say it. And yes, and that was that project and still is happening, no? It's that you were saying. So we're still harvesting that project, we're still working with them, and we're still on this defend activism of trying to talk about what is happening in Milpalta. No?
Well, I think in that actual project it was not so much about collective cooking. It was more about we were going like for, I don't know, 3 months. No, 1 year. We were like for 1 year, and we was helping harvesting the milpa, and that's also when you learn the work of what you are eating, and it blows your mind. But I think also is this thing about working together for a common good, and it's for like, I think for all the collective, what changed our set of working together is to achieve something is also a political organization, no? And if you can come together to do something together that has a final good object or good, what else can you do, no? And I think it's this political way of thinking. It's also a way of, going back about what the states want you to know, that the only way you can achieve something, or the only way you can do something, is through a vote, no? Vote, yes. So, yes, and also working together is taking away the Catholic heritage of work as a punishment, no? So, yeah, so working together with people is also like perhaps a curatorial practice to achieve other projects.
Farid, just when you were speaking, I thought of non-grong for sure. You probably have thought of it as well. But maybe can you maybe share with the audience a little bit about the non-grong and the lumpung, which are like the most important terms that you used to curate the documenta?
Yeah, I think it was not planned that way, but it became that way. Some stuff caught up. But maybe continuing with what you said before as well, about the importance of corporeality and because of my limited theoretical terms, I would say it's gut understanding instead of like brain understanding or head understanding. Then like cooking, eating, hanging out, or nongkrong together. That's Indonesian. I can touch upon it further later, but that's when actually we learn as well. Throughout the experiences we managed to offer, actually instead of representational talks, text, whatever media, the most effective one, people understand instantly better when we actually share a space together, then the space allows open enough to have relationships happen, not always in harmony, of course. Conflict is very, very also important, I have to say. But then, but it allows it to happen. It's not like a space that kind of like only is available to do this, that it got taken from real life. But I think I wasn't there, but hearing you talking about the market inside the market and all this kind of stuff, I think that conflict in space of like trying to clash, make that clash, then people starting to understand your practice better, anyone's practice better. Oh, this is what you're trying to get into, and all those kind of stuff. Then it happened. Nongkrong, I mean, if I like, coming back to your question, is something we just do. Of course, it is somehow political. Looking back, I understand it political as well, because I was born in Jakarta and raised. My generation of my parents grew up in the New Order era of Suharto in Indonesia, that it's when Indonesia had a boom, economic boom. It becomes like a place of free market. Up until now, it's one of the most free market system in the world, I would argue. Everything got sold, land, sea, water, islands, whatever, but got sold to the highest bidder. But then they told me when I grew up, like seeing people nongkrong, hanging out on the street, doing nothing and all those kind of stuff, as if it's something bad. So when I was growing up and becoming my own self, let's say, like a lot of people have problems with their fathers, no? Like, I'm opening it up right now. I didn't plan to do it, but it's almost like that as well. Like, I was trying to prove that what was told to me before in the productive manner could be done differently. So things that was understood as unproductive, waste of time, needless to do, actually have to be avoided at all costs, all those kind of stuff, becoming actually a very useful tool. That's how I understand it. Also with like, shortly about Lumbung, for example, it was just a shortcut. I hope you can still hear me okay, because it was a shortcut that we took at one point around 2016 and 2017 to claim to claim what we're trying to do. Lumbung is something vernacular. Everyone in Indonesia understand it. The government use it. Every organization is using it. Even like my mother bought vegetables from something called lumbung pangan or something like that, like a shop behind their house, all those kind of stuff. But we use it as a shortcut to try to make us first and foremost understand what we're trying to do. Seeing ourselves as a bank of resources, we have a lot of surplus, space, time, people, skills, money. A lot of times it's not a surplus. We're always in deficit up until today. But even then, we can share it. How to keep on continuing that, including to each other, and then hopefully it's just like it can be taken by others. It's like it doesn't have to keep the name even, and then people can practice it again differently in different contexts with different challenges, trying to answer it. And then why we did and what we're still doing what we're doing is because we know that a lot of people are trying to do things this economically, trying to survive, trying to sustain their practice and all those kind of stuff with different challenges, and we can always learn from it. And we're curious about it basically most of the time. Like hearing you is valuable basically right now.
Thank you so much. So one of the things that comes to my mind is the word sustainability. How can we actually make this collaborative process, these common spaces, this nongkrong, this lumbung, how can we make these things to actually make sense under the system that we are? How can we insert them rather than just use them as some sort of resistance? How can we make them expand, if you like?
If you don't mind me starting. It's important to underline that we didn't come from antagonistic point of view either. Like we're not reacting and being against what is there. We just know that how things are done in mainstream or popularly just don't work for us. So basically it's a way to say that we're a bunch of rejects, and dropouts. Because of that, we have to build our own system. We're forced to do so, no? So it's not it's not to resist. It's fine. Those people who can survive like my parents again. It turned out to be like a psychoanalytic moment for me. This is supposed to be like this, I think. But like they're doing great. I'm not criticizing them. They've been doing well in a certain system. It's just not working for me. It's not working for my friends. So the question becomes what type of system actually works for us. And it's up until today, like in the last, since November, we've been in our space, in Good School, ruangrupa Serumen Grafis Ruhara space, collective of collectives, we've been holding assemblies, never-ending discussions. Well, also, even what I'm trying to say is, even today, we still don't know what works for us, for all of us. So it's putting things into real life with challenges, with everyone's biographies, opening up like where they're at in their life, what kind of system actually works, because we know we couldn't continue how we have been doing with what we have been surviving with up until today. The last 3 years we've been doing it, we've been surviving with a certain way. It stopped working as well. So even right now we don't know, So it is a continuous struggle and maybe
experimenting.
Keep on doing it.
Yes, I really agree with whatever you are saying. And so for us, I think for the collective, it has been very important to how can we achieve like autonomy, no? Because at the beginning we start like, I don't know, applying to scholarships or applying to people that help art, and it was so funny because even in the first page where you have to put the dot if you are like performance, I don't remember, like video, painting, and I was like, I don't enter in, like this collaborative practice, like collaborating ecosystems, collective cooking, feminist. It didn't go in any dot, no? So what we did to like, in order to, I think what we want to conserve in everything is collaboration, no? And being with women and cooking with women, and so that is the important thing. So what we are trying to do is how can we conserve that in order, and everything can change, but we want that, no? We want to be with women in a place, talking, no, and cooking and doing stuff together. So what we did is like an economic process of cooking for other people, and in that way we can be autonomous in what we want to do. And what is also like, if we are now in therapy, I want to say something that makes me very, really angry. Like in Mexico, we are, I don't know, like 5 projects that are working with food. And so, and I think it's very important to institutions to start thinking also about how, because I think they're also the ones who are making this competition like more hard, and each time more hard, and each time more hard. So you get so precarious that you need to compete with others, no, in order to get that, no. So in Mexico we are, I don't know, 5 projects that work with food, and of course we know each other a lot and we love each other a lot because we love to talk about the same stuff. So this residency that I'm not going to say the name, but start to say like, we want to work with food, so send us your best people who work with food, and only one will win, no? So each of us, we knew that we were competing for the same residency, no? So, and at the end is like what we want to still promote, no? Like this kind of competition, that these European residents can come to this place and say, which one of you is the best? O sea, no? So I think we have to be also like hard with this kind of practice and think where not to, I don't know, like how can we stop to fight each other and start to see how we can collaborate with each other. And it's not only about saying, oh, I'm an autonomous project and an independent project. It's also like, well, we are 2 autonomous and independent projects. How can we do stuff together? And and that's the force that I think it will be like the force to stop this kind of competition practice that the big institutions are bringing with them now as well.
Do you want to add something?
I was thinking like, at some point we were invited at COP26 to do some dialogues and conversations, and we work with a lot of farmers and people from different parts of the world. And they were asking, what do, and very long conversation. And at some point, one of the farmers said, because we want to eat delicious food, and that was it. And it was like, okay, so it's not about the agro-industry. You were saying, okay, those things and those people are there, and they will keep doing what they're doing, and they don't give nothing about us. But let's create the world to eat this delicious food. So that was like, okay, so let's create the conditions again to be able to eat delicious food and to share this delicious food that you are doing. And one of the things we do as a collective is it's like we go to different parts of Mexico to buy the food we like very fresh, the food that women produce in their own backyards. And because of what? Because we want to eat good, and it's something like really honest
And simple.
and simple.
Yeah.
maybe I can, if it's shortly, like come to that, like, yeah, there are ways to do things, and then we're trying to do things differently, no? Back to the competition, a lot of times they got threatened. That's what I still don't understand up until today. We're not threatening, like we're so small, no? Like we're so precarious, we're so small, we're just trying to do things the way we know work for us. We're not threatening to you, but then because of the logic of competition, a lot of people, or like, the power that be, let's say, feel threatened to us, and then they cannot coexist, which up until right now, a lot of times we're still surprised in like how bitter it could be for them understanding what we're trying to do. No, an anecdote of like when we're trying to explain back in 2018, 2019 what we're trying to do, and then the question becomes like that from the jury or whatever, like our people. So what you're trying to do is going to be like have a lot of farmers in castle, and then selling food and having fun. But then why, like, how could we become that? That's then, like, for us, we're just like, yes, it sounds great, no? Like, what's wrong with that? Like, why do you think it cannot exist that way? Anyway, that's just my addition.
Thank you so much. That was so insightful. I have one last question before we open this to the public. I believe, but probably this is very personal because I myself have a collective as well. And I believe that these concepts such as horizontality, collaboration, community, common spaces, they get astray so easily. Like it's so easy to just fall into the same structures we know, like to think of hierarchies. Like I think it's like a constant struggle to actually keep in mind all these concepts that we really want to implement. So yeah, probably this is like the first question, but yeah, what is the strategy to actually do it? Like how can you do you have power structures within the collectives? Like, do you have a boss? Do you have a leader? How do you decide things? Is there a democratic process? Like, how do you work together?
You want? It's a big one, no? I believe in particularities, I think. Like, I know there are a lot, like, considering we've been around since 2000, ruangrupa, yeah, with all the roller coaster ride we've been. There's a luck in it as well. There's like something that cannot be replicated because individuals cannot be like, cannot be made into a recipe. So it's not like, maybe I cannot answer it as like, this is the answer to your question. But we're lucky that we didn't start with proving a certain way of doing, like horizontality, for example. Yes, we understand how it is kind of like great, but also throughout the years, learning from other collectives around different places, we don't exist to prove certain theories. That's kind of clear. A lot of us holds different political views, especially when it becomes real or like practical politics, who to vote. Whether you're an anarchist, whether you believe in borderline fundamentalist Muslim views, like we know it's part of life, so we deal with it. We know each other that way, no? And then we don't struggle for one way to do things. So we address as well that some people are actually more talkative than others. Some people are older. Some people are more powerful. Some people are like have more skills of convincing others than others and all those kind of stuff. but actually like also opening our process to other people, like interlocal, we call it. So it's not our own culture, not only in Indonesia. It actually helps a lot as well, because then we realize different dynamics in different culture, but how to address it. So there are structures that we're experimenting with every now and then, of like how to shut these people who are more alpha up, you know? And most of the times, I'll close with this, I think, with this answer. Funnily enough, looking back, most of the times, those personalities, the alpha personalities, mostly male, of course, 99% of, they cannot work with us, which is great in a way, you know. Then it's a way to say as well, like the way we do things cannot be implemented that directly for others. So that's exactly why we're curious on different dynamics, and then it needs time to understand that. And then we have to give time. A lot of times we're lacking in it, and then we have to fight for that time. Like, this is the first time I met you. I want to know you better. Like, you know, it's non-productive. It's not about we can work together directly, but okay, then now I know you. If something happened and you're doing something, then I have a real curiosity on how you do things, you know, and Terremoto as well, and all those kind of stuff.
I want to add something before you answer this question. But I was reading the other day this manifesto called The Radical Shy, which I thought it may be super interesting. The Shy Radicals, which is like this fictitious nation and how they have these so many rules, and extrovert people is not allowed into this fictitious nation. And it's super interesting. It's like they have a flag, they have like a code, they have a certain type of language. And I thought it was like a super insightful and fun way to try to think how to do the things in a different manner. So just when you were talking about who's the alpha, just for introverts, a world just for introverts. So
Well, it was a very hard question, because I think it's something that we struggle, every day, because it's the power structures are there. No, you're just not going to arrive and so. I think something that helps in the collective is like the transformation, like the constant, and again, like I think it's very important to learn from other species, like I said at the beginning. And something that I learned with fermenting is that the only way you can preserve stuff is by transformating, no, like doing it in a certain way, and not like cheese. No, if you want milk all the time, it will rotten. But if you learn how to transform that stuff, it can last for years, no? So something, it's like how can we reinvent ourselves in a like way that we have to do more stuff, but also like if something is not working, it can end, no? And also to know that perhaps this project is completely ephemeral, like ephemeral, no? And someday it is not working, it can stop, or it can evolve in something else, no? So yes, so like not trying to control the things you like, the objective, but knowing that this definition, it will change with time.
Yes, and I guess that was like also the origin of the collective. It was not something that we decided in a priori way, no, let's do a collective. So at some point we're like, oh my God, we've been cooking together for like 8 years. So let's start doing something with this, because there are a lot of things and themes and Martina studied economic, and she was like, okay, they taught me at school that the first day of school was like, let's get rid of all the maize in Mexico, no? Let's import everything. So this is serious, no? It was like, let's talk about these things that are bothering us through an art practice, through putting a name to what it's always the same, you know. So I guess like being very, so the only thing that it's always happening is changing, and it's just like reading like it's like a choreography, you know, in the collective, and who knows, if you do this, you are able to do this, but you are not, and that's what you're saying, you know. So let's listen to everybody's desires, and that's it, you know. That's the easiest.
Do we have questions from the public? Anybody could like to make a question? Okay, in that case, I have a final question.
Hola. En español, ¿verdad?
Sí, si quieres, sí.
Sí, no, estoy esperando que se ponga. No, estaba pensando como en el contexto ahorita, que está en este contexto, que se está dando esta plática. Entonces, la pregunta era más o menos, a partir de su experiencia, ¿cómo ven este contexto, ¿no? Pues están hablando de temas de economía alternativa, de Comunar, y como, sí, la experiencia que han tenido, por ejemplo, con la fundación hasta ahorita, cuáles son sus, ¿cómo se dice? Como su visión hasta ahorita, su punto de vista, y como qué recomendaciones pueden hacer para, no sé, para esta fundación que está entrando a México.
Bueno, creo que es una pregunta un poco difícil para ti, porque el contexto pues, es como complicado conocerlo en poco tiempo. Pero bueno, ¿qué consejo daría esta fundación? Pues como mucha escucha, ¿no? Mucha escucha porque en realidad, no, o sea, somos un país complejísimo, somos o sea, es un Estado-nación inventado, entonces en realidad tendríamos que pues, conocer en qué contexto quieren trabajar y a quién quieren escuchar, básicamente, ¿no? O sea, no podemos decir, bueno, ya llegamos a México y vamos a hablar de todo esto, ¿no? O de, pues, más bien que se elija dónde quieren o a quién quieren escuchar.
Something that we were discussing earlier, Farid and I, is that we could like, and we were thinking to mention this, that it is very important for the Ayarkut Foundation not only to, have this series of talks and, have this space for discussion and reflection, but to actually try to put it into practice. Mm-hmm. So this could be an advice, like how these reflections are actually relevant to make it happen somehow, how they can probably share the resources they have, how they support all sorts of practices, which I think this is something they are thinking. So, I don't know if you want to add something, Farid.
Yeah, for someone, I touch upon that actually, and thank you for the question because of that as well, so I can come back in the beginning. I'm learning, like I'm not from here. This is my first time here as well, and then I've spent maybe a week or so over here. But that's why visiting Mexico has been important for me as well, because I've heard about it a lot, but unless I'm here, I wouldn't be able to understand it fully. I feel I will not be able either up until right after this. But how actors, we're talking about ecosystem, we do use that term a lot as well, to understand that ecosystem. And then what role can an agent or an entity play in that ecosystem? Different answers could come up with, but and then there's no one answer, of course. But because we're talking about about different way to do things. I hope this is not going to be only talks, no? Like I said it in the beginning. Like, I hope it actually inform not only the foundation, but also others to push further old agents, new agents, and all those kind of stuff, to be aware of what type of role they play in the ecosystem. In that way, after that, like every other ecosystems, it's not only the giver or the harmonious entities that needs to be there. Predators, pushing that kind of metaphor further. Predators, chaos agents, all those kind of stuff are actually needed as well in order to balance that kind of stuff. What does it mean to be balanced is always different. Even in Indonesia, we also came up with different answers all the time. That's why we shifted our practice throughout the years. Sometimes we began with art. We began being an artist collective. After a while, we played with the notion of collectives. And then afterwards, we realized that we are a bank of resources. After more than 15 years, we cannot be the big tree, an old big tree that actually overshadowed everything, no? So, but then we're still figuring out how to share ourselves, what role of we can play in our ecosystem. It becomes more complicated when it becomes interlocal. I'm not going to say global or international because that's, but interlocal when different entities, small but many, that's the way we like to do it, no? How we touch upon each other instead of one swallowing everything becomes the biggest player of. Then it's monoculture for me. Then it becomes the palm oil industry in Indonesia, no? Because that's the biggest industry, well, one of the biggest. But how to not be like that? How to still keep the richness, because it's there. Luckily, it's not that established where we're coming from. How to do it here? Unfortunately, I don't have I don't have a direct answer to that. I have super limited knowledge about it, but yeah, at least to be aware of that, and then how to not repeat things that has been done before. Realizing your agency and what's possible. It's not going to be easy, but that we started talking about alternative economy right now. How to practice is the next one, no? That's at least the way I see things.
If there's another burning question, yeah, okay. This is our last question. Sí.
Just a brief comment and question for you, because I also have a horizontal collective in art. And when they were asking about the way is there a leader or not, in my experience, the most difficult thing is to disappoint others with their expectations, because some people come to you expecting that you become the leader, but when you are not, it's like, then what are you doing, you know? It's funny because they don't see the value sometimes if you don't become this kind of leader. And I mean, my question to you is, if you've gone through kind of these experiences, like disappointing, or other thing is that people are used to be told what to do, and when you don't tell them what to do, people can be a little bit lost. So just a brief question for you, if you have experienced about this disappointment with the people.
Well, I guess I'm a really bad leader, so many people might be disappointed, but I don't think there is a leader, no? There is like somebody knows how to do things and the other is very bad at the others, and there is no kind of sometimes we can be mean to the other, that's true. Like, oh, you don't know how to do this, and you spoiled everything. But I don't think there is a leader or any expectations of a leader. No, it's like, let's do things together.
I don't think for me that I don't have the same experience. I think there is all the time like an expectation of a leader, and that's also something you have to unlearn at the end. And you like, for myself, it's not to be a controller totally. Like or using me, and not us. No, so. Yes, so it's also like learning, because we don't know how to, we have been in this world where there is a leader, so it's not also so easy to say like, oh no, we are super horizontal, like. But for me, like, again, it's nice to see like other species, how they behave, in order to learn how to behave with other, no. So that's like my conclusion, no, like. If there is not a human way of this horizontality, perhaps we have to seek in other organizations in order to learn how to be horizontal. And of course, we are like very far of it, because there is so many privilege and complexities. But yes, it's un camino.
I don't know if you want to add anything else? Any of you?
Maybe to the question, but if we don't have time, fine.
Is there another question? We have time? No, we don't have time. So thank you so much, Farid. Thank you so much, Martina, Carmen. This was very generous. In Terremoto, one of the things that we've been thinking when curating this program is how to approach to our system, to our art ecosystem, into a much more healthier way, in a more imaginative, poetic, and radical ways of thinking our own economies. So thank you very much for coming, and let's hope we can put into practice some of the knowledge we learned today from Ruangrupa and Colectivo Amasijo. Thank you so much.